I should have walked away the moment I saw it. I should have turned around, shut the door, and pretended I never saw a thing. But I didn't. I stayed. I watched. And what happened next? I can never unsee. Not in my dreams. Not in my quietest moments. Not even when I try to convince myself that it didn't mean anything. Because it did. It meant everything. And now, I live with that moment buried in the back of my mind, like a secret that scratches at the edges of my soul every single day. My name is Olivia, and this is the story I never planned to tell, not to a friend, not to a therapist, not even to my husband. Because once you say something out loud, it becomes real. And once it's real, you can't take it back. It all started on a rainy Tuesday. Funny how things like this don't come crashing in with warning signs or big dramatic music. They come in quietly. Like fog. Soft. Slow. Silent. They settle in before you even notice the chill on your skin. That day, the house felt empty. Tom, my husband, was out of town for work. Again. He didn't even kiss me goodbye that morning. Just muttered something about meetings and deadlines and "I'll call you later." But of course, he didn't. And Ethan, his son, my stepson, had just moved back in a few weeks ago. 19. Quiet. Polite. Said thank you after dinner. Stayed mostly in his room. He wasn't a problem. But that night, he became something else entirely. You ever feel like your house is haunted? Not by ghosts, but by silence? That's what it's been like for me, for years now. I walk through the hallways and everything feels too still, like the air is holding its breath, like the walls are listening to my thoughts. I sit at the kitchen table and stare at my reflection in the window at night, wondering where I went. Not where I physically am, no, I know I'm here. But the me I used to be. The woman who laughed without thinking, who felt seen, who mattered. She's gone. Replaced by someone who cooks for people who don't thank her. Who folds laundry no one notices. Who gets dressed in the morning even when there's no one looking. But that night, someone was looking. And what I saw him doing, what I felt in that moment, it changed everything. You know, we always think these kinds of stories happen to other people. Strangers in books, women in headlines, the broken ones, the reckless ones, the ones who should have known better. But what if it happens to someone like me? Someone who always followed the rules. Someone who tried to do everything right, but still ended up wrong? I didn't go looking for this. I didn't plan for any of it, but it found me anyway. And now, here I am, sitting in the wreckage, wondering if I'm still a good person, or if I ever really was. Some moments start off looking like nothing, just a glance, a sound, a late-night shadow in the hallway, but later, when you replay it in your mind, you realize that was the exact moment everything shifted. That was the first crack. That was the first drop of rain before the flood. And that's what this story is. A slow flood. A quiet unraveling. A single, shattering moment I wish I could take back, but wouldn't even know where to begin. So before we go any further, I need to ask you something. Not as a narrator. Not as a stranger on your screen. But as a woman. A wife. A human being who made a mistake she still doesn't fully understand. Have you ever been so lonely that you didn't even recognize yourself anymore? Have you ever stared at someone and felt seen for the first time in years, only to hate yourself for needing it? If so, then maybe, just maybe, you'll understand what happened next. But if you're here to judge, I won't stop you. I've already judged myself more than enough. So, if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, if you believe in understanding the messy parts of being human, then subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga and stay with me until the end. Because trust me, this story doesn't end the way you think. When Ethan moved back in, I thought it was temporary. Just a few weeks, maybe a month, just until he found his footing again. He'd started college, but didn't finish his first semester. Said it wasn't for him. There were vague reasons. Stress. Disconnection. Tom didn't push. He just told him to come home. So we made space, moved boxes, cleared out the guest room. And just like that, the rhythm of the house changed quietly, but noticeably. I didn't think much of it at first. Ethan was polite, grateful, always thanked me for dinner, didn't leave dishes in the sink, didn't make noise. He mostly stayed in his room. I mostly stayed in mine even when I was surrounded by people. Tom is a good man, a provider, hardworking, but emotionally, he's never really been here. Even when he's sitting across from me, he's somewhere else on his phone, buried in spreadsheets or already halfway into tomorrow. He used to laugh more. He used to notice me. Now, when we sit at the table, there are 3 plates and no conversation. The clink of forks against porcelain, the soft hum of the fridge, the occasional cough. That's our music now. No one asks how anyone's day was. We just exist. In the same space, but apart. I thought I could live with that. I thought it was just part of getting older, of marriage maturing, of routines hardening. But sometimes, silence doesn't mean peace. Sometimes, it means distance. And distance. It does things to you. Most nights, Tom worked late or fell asleep on the couch with his laptop on his chest. I started reading alone in bed. Soft lamp light. Book in one hand, a glass of wine in the other. It became my ritual, my way of not feeling forgotten. At some point, Ethan started staying up too. Not at first, but slowly. I'd hear his footsteps down the hall, the microwave door, a creaky floorboard just outside my room. Once, I stepped out to grab water and found him sitting at the kitchen table. Hood up, laptop open, cereal bowl in front of him. He looked up and smiled. I hadn't seen someone smile at me like that in a long time. Not out of obligation. Just warm, easy, like I mattered. We didn't talk much at first. Just small moments. Passing each other in the hallway. Reaching for the same mug. Sharing a chuckle over something on TV left running in the background. And it's strange, isn't it? How those small, forgettable moments are the ones that come back to you later. Louder than the big ones. The way he said goodnight. The way he leaned against the kitchen counter and listened when I told a silly story about a neighbor. The way he actually looked at me when I was talking. Not through me. At me. I didn't think anything of it. Not then. Not when it started. I told myself it was just nice to be noticed. Just nice to feel visible again. To feel like someone still saw me as more than just a background character in this house. But deep down, I knew better. I knew something had shifted. Not between us, exactly. But inside me, and once something inside you shifts, even if no one else sees it, you do. And you can't unfeel it. You carry it with you. Even when you try to pretend everything's normal. Even when you cook dinner. Fold clothes. Smile across the table. That shift stays. And it waits. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up. No reason. No nightmare. Just awake. The kind of waking where everything feels off. Like your body knew something before your mind caught up. The room was still, but the house wasn't. I heard something faint, almost nothing. A dull hum, like voices behind a wall. I thought maybe Tom left the TV on again in the den, but then I remembered he wasn't home. He'd flown out that afternoon for a conference in Phoenix. He'd barely said goodbye. The sound was coming from downstairs. I slipped out of bed, not bothering with slippers. Just a loose robe over my nightgown. The floorboards creaked under me, and I paused on the landing listening. Still faint sound. No panic. Just curiosity. I walked down the stairs slowly, careful not to make noise. Each step felt like it stretched time. Like I was walking into something I wasn't meant to find. As I rounded the corner into the hallway, the light from the living room spilled softly across the floor. The TV wasn't on. It was a laptop, perched on the arm of the couch. Ethan was sitting there, headphones on, eyes locked on the screen. Back slightly hunched, mouth parted just a little. At first, I thought he was watching a movie. Or maybe playing a game. He didn't see me. But then, I caught a glimpse of the screen through the reflection in the mirror by the hallway. And my breath caught. It wasn't a movie. And it wasn't a game. It was something else. Something private. Something intimate. Something he clearly thought he was alone for. My hand went to my chest without thinking. I took a step back into the shadow, heart racing, every nerve suddenly on edge. I should have turned away, gone back upstairs, pretended I never came down. But I didn't. I stood there, frozen, watching him, not for long, but long enough. Long enough to feel the heat rush to my face. Long enough to feel something twist in my stomach. Not just shock. Shame. Yes, that was there. But also, something else. I didn't want to name it at the time. I didn't want to admit I'd even felt it. It wasn't desire. Not quite. It was curiosity. Loneliness. A strange ache. The feeling of being outside something warm, watching from the cold. I backed away, quietly, slowly, every step calculated. He still didn't know I was there. He didn't hear the stairs creak as I went up. Didn't see me standing in the hallway, barefoot and breathless. I got back into bed, heart still pounding. Pulled the blanket up, though I wasn't cold. Stared at the ceiling, blank and wide. And I felt awake. Fully, painfully awake. What disturbed me the most wasn't what he was watching, or that I saw it. It was that for a few seconds, just a few, I envied what he had in front of him. Someone being touched. Someone being wanted. Someone being seen. I wasn't supposed to feel that. Not about him. Not in that moment. But I did. And once you feel something, even for a moment, you can't unfeel it. You can bury it. But it waits. It lingers. It remembers. And so did I. I felt like a voyeur. A stranger in my own home. A woman watching something she had no business witnessing. But I didn't tell Tom. I didn't even consider it. I told myself, it's not my place. He's a grown boy. He has privacy. It was late. I shouldn't have gone downstairs. But that wasn't the real reason. The truth was quieter. Darker. I didn't want to explain why I was there. Why I stood so long. Why I didn't look away the moment I realized what I was seeing. Because I should have. But I didn't. And I knew deep down it had nothing to do with Ethan. And everything to do with me. That night, I lay awake for hours. The ceiling felt too close. The room too warm. My skin too aware of itself. I kept replaying it. That moment. That image. Not out of thrill, but confusion, shame, curiosity, and beneath all of that, loneliness. When was the last time Tom touched me? Not brushed past me in the hallway. Not kissed me out of routine. I mean really touched me like I mattered. When was the last time he looked at me, like a woman? I couldn't remember. I remembered folding his shirts, making his coffee, booking his dentist appointments. But not the last time he reached for me without needing something. I started asking myself questions I didn't want to answer. How long had I felt like this? When did I stop feeling like a wife? When did I become invisible? The next morning, I acted like everything was normal. Eggs. Toast. Quiet glances. Ethan came down later than usual. Hair messy. Hoodie on. He muttered, mourning, and poured a cup of coffee. I avoided his eyes. I couldn't look at him, because if I did, he might see something. And I didn't even know what that something was yet. He didn't know I'd seen him. But I carried it in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I told myself, he's a grown man now. This isn't about him. It was just a moment. A mistake. An accident. Maybe even just curiosity. That's all. Nothing more. But the words felt hollow even as I repeated them. Because it wasn't just about that night. It was about what that moment reminded me of, the way it exposed how empty I'd been feeling for years. How starved I was for something I couldn't name. And how easy it was to feel something from someone I shouldn't. I tried to distract myself. cleaned the kitchen twice, went for a walk I didn't enjoy, called a friend just to hear someone talk. But every time I passed him in the hallway, every time I heard his door open, every time his voice said thanks or good night, I felt a pull, not to him, but to the attention, to the feeling of being close to someone who was alive. That sounds wrong. I know it does. But Tom feels like wallpaper now. Part of the structure. Reliable, yes, but distant. Always somewhere else in his head, in his work, in his stress. Ethan. He was present. He noticed things. And I hated myself for noticing him in return. I wasn't supposed to feel anything. But now I couldn't stop feeling everything, all at once. Guilt. Shame. Sadness. Longing I hadn't touched in years. Questions I'd buried deep and hoped never to dig back up. I started to wonder if this house was more than quiet. Maybe it was empty. And maybe I'd been empty with it. But no one ever asked. No one ever noticed. Until now. And maybe that's what scared me most. After that night, something shifted. Not suddenly. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But I did. It was in the way I walked through the house. More alert, more aware. And it was in the way we began crossing paths more often. Late at night. Quiet footsteps on wood floors. The low hum of the refrigerator. Two people drifting through the same silence. At first, it was coincidence. I'd go to the kitchen for water, and there he was already there. Or I'd be reading on the couch, and he'd pass by, pause, and sit in the armchair across from me. We barely spoke. Just small talk. But there was something in the space between the words. Something neither of us named. One night, I opened the cabinet to grab a glass. So did he. Our hands touched just briefly. His fingers against mine. Warm. Still. I didn't move right away. He didn't either. It couldn't have lasted more than 2 seconds. But it felt like time folded in on itself. And when I finally stepped back, my throat felt tight. He smiled, just a little, then poured his water and left without a word. I stood there, glass in hand, unsure if it had really happened. Unsure why my chest felt like it was buzzing. Another night, he sat down across from me on the sofa. TV on, but neither of us watching. He sighed long, slow. I asked if something was wrong. He hesitated, then said, "My mom, she never really listened. I mean, she heard me, but she never listened." He didn't look at me when he said it. Just stared at the carpet. I nodded. Quietly. I didn't ask questions. I just let him speak. He talked about how he never felt like he fit in. How college made him feel small. How most people only pretend to care. He said, "You're different. You actually hear me." And I wanted to say, because I know what that feels like. But I didn't. I just nodded again, biting the inside of my cheek, trying to hold something back I didn't have a name for. It became a pattern. We started lingering more in shared spaces. Not long, just enough. He started asking me about books I was reading. What I used to do before I married Tom. Whether I ever felt stuck. One night he said, "You ever think about just starting over? Like leaving everything behind?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I knew what he meant. I said more times than I'd ever admit. He looked at me for a second too long. And I looked right back. I started wearing different clothes around the house. Not on purpose. At least, not at first. But I stopped throwing on the big sweaters I used to live in. I let the robe hang a little looser. Started brushing my hair before going downstairs, even if it was midnight. It wasn't for him. That's what I told myself. But maybe it wasn't not for him either. I wasn't planning anything. But maybe I didn't stop anything either. He was seeing me. Really seeing me. Not as his stepmother. Not as Tom's wife. Not as the quiet woman who cleaned and cooked and stayed out of the way. But as someone with stories. With thoughts. With ache. And the more he saw me, the more I felt like I existed again. It was dangerous comfort. But comfort all the same. And after so long in silence, even danger can feel like warmth. It was a Thursday night. One of those evenings where the air feels too still. No breeze, no sound. Just that thick kind of quiet that presses against your skin. Tom was still out of town. Another late meeting. Another excuse I no longer bothered to question. I was on the couch, legs tucked under me, a book open in my lap. But I wasn't reading. My eyes were moving across the page, but nothing was sinking in. My thoughts were everywhere and nowhere. The lamp beside me gave off a soft amber light. The house was dim, sleepy, and quiet. Then I heard him. Footsteps. Soft ones. Ethan. He came into the room and didn't say a word. He just sat down. Not on the armchair. Not across the room. He sat right next to me. Close. Too close. I could feel the warmth of his shoulder near mine. And I didn't move. I didn't lean away. Our arms brushed. Then our hands. He didn't flinch. Neither did I. Our fingers barely touched, but that soft, hesitant contact felt louder than any word I could have spoken. And then, he looked at me. Quiet. Steady. Not like a boy. Not like a stepson. And he said, almost in a whisper, "You look really pretty when you're sad." That sentence. It broke something inside me. Or maybe it revealed something that had already been broken for a long time. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just looked back at him, my breath caught somewhere between my ribs and my throat, and for a long moment, there was nothing. No sound. No words. Just stillness. That stillness where everything that shouldn't be said suddenly lives between two people who can't take it back. Then he leaned in. Not fast. Not forceful. Just close enough for me to feel the pause. Close enough for me to stop it, if I wanted to. But I didn't. He kissed me. Not on the lips. Not bold. Just a soft kiss on the cheek. But it lingered. And it wasn't innocent. It wasn't casual. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't thanks for dinner or good night. It was something else. Something careful. Something questioning. Something waiting. And I didn't stop him. I didn't move. And I didn't stop myself from wanting more. I just sat there frozen in a moment I didn't expect, and yet, one I'd been walking toward without realizing it. He pulled away slowly, eyes searching mine like he was waiting for permission or punishment. I didn't give him either. I just looked at him. Quiet. Breathless. And when he finally stood and walked away, I didn't call him back. But I didn't tell him to stop either. Because the truth is, part of me didn't want him to, and that part, the one I'd buried deep under years of being overlooked, untouched, unspoken to, that part had come alive. Even if just for a second. And once you feel that, even if nothing else happens, everything changes. After that night, everything changed. Not loudly. Not with arguments or accusations. But with silence. A deeper kind of silence than before. One that didn't just fill the house, it filled the space between us. Between me and Ethan. Between me and myself. He became distant. Not rude. Not cold. Just quieter. He stopped staying up late. No more footsteps in the hallway. No more warm glances across the room. He'd eat early or late, but rarely when I did. And if we crossed paths, he barely looked at me. I started to feel the air change when he entered a room. Like the walls held their breath. And I stopped reading downstairs. Stopped wearing the robe. Stopped waiting for something that already happened but never really did. I carried that night like a bruise I couldn't explain. Tender. Always present. But hidden just enough to pretend nothing had happened at all. We never talked about it. He never mentioned the kiss. Neither did I. It became a ghost between us, always there, always felt, but never named. Tom came back from his trip that weekend. Same tired eyes. Same phone in his hand before he even took off his shoes. He asked how things were. I said, fine. He didn't look up. Just nodded and walked past me. But even he felt colder somehow. Not because he knew. He didn't. But maybe he sensed the shift too. Even if he couldn't explain it. He touched me less. Spoke even less than that. There were nights we didn't say a single word to each other. I started watching him sleep, wondering if he still saw me the way he used to, wondering if he ever really did. I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. Not in the way people assume. Not about the kiss. But about the space he'd left behind. The echo. I started to wonder if he hated me. Or if he was afraid he didn't. Because I couldn't tell. And that terrified me more than anything. He avoided being alone with me. Stayed in his room. Left the house more often. And yet every time I passed his door, every time I heard the water running in the bathroom, every time his voice floated faintly from the hallway, I felt it all over again. That night. That pause. That look. That kiss. That line we didn't cross, but didn't back away from, either. I tried to act normal. Tried to make small talk. Asked him about his job search. About the news. About anything. He kept his answers short. Careful. Flat. I didn't know if he was protecting himself or protecting me. Maybe both. And the worst part? I missed him. I missed being seen. Even if it was wrong. Even if it was dangerous. Because even guilt, even shame, feels like something when you've lived in emotional emptiness for too long. And now, that emptiness was all I had again. Only now I knew what it felt like to have it broken. And I didn't know how to go back. Was I a monster for feeling what I felt? Or was I just human? I've asked myself that question 100 times since that night. 1,000. And I still don't know the answer. Because nothing happened. Not really. Not in the way people measure things. No clothes came off. No vows were spoken. No secrets were said aloud. But everything happened. Emotionally. Spiritually. Morally. We crossed a line. Maybe not with our bodies, but with something deeper. Something harder to confess. And harder to forgive. I replay that night in my head over and over. Not because I want to. Not for pleasure. But for understanding. For clarity. To figure out where it started. And why I didn't stop it. And every time I go back there in my mind, to that couch, that look, that silence, that kiss, I feel like I'm holding my breath. Like I'm suspended in the middle of something that was never supposed to begin, but now can't be undone. I can't talk to Tom. I wouldn't even know where to begin. How do you explain to your husband that the emptiness he left in you was seen by someone else? That the silence he gave you was filled by the one person it never should have been? And Ethan. He won't talk about it. And I wouldn't dare bring it up. Because whatever it was, it's buried now. And maybe it should stay buried. But I can't stop carrying it. Inside me. Every day. It lives in my breath when I pass his room. In the silence between me and Tom at dinner. In the ache that pulses when I'm alone in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, listening to a house that feels more like a stranger than a home. I miss the way he looked at me that night. Not because it was right. Not because it was good. But because, for 1 second, just one, I felt wanted. I felt seen. I felt like I wasn't invisible anymore. And I hate myself for missing it. I hate that part of me that still aches for that look. That attention. That fragile, forbidden feeling of being alive again. What does that make me? What kind of woman admits this? What kind of wife? But then I ask myself, am I worse for feeling it, or for pretending I never did? Am I terrible for wanting more, when I've spent years surviving on less? I don't know. And I don't think I ever will. All I know is that something inside me shifted. Quietly. Permanently. And no matter how still everything looks on the outside, I am not the same woman I was before that night. Not anymore. Do you think I'm a terrible person? Or just a woman who got lost in the silence of her own home? Because I don't know anymore. I don't know where the line is between loneliness and longing, between comfort and crossing over, between who I was supposed to be and who I became in the dark. Maybe you felt it too. That ache. That quiet ache that settles into your chest when days go by and no one really sees you. Not for who you are, just for what you do. Maybe you've smiled at the dinner table while something inside you begged to be noticed, begged to be touched, to be felt. Maybe you've looked at someone you shouldn't and wondered what would happen if they looked back. So tell me, was it betrayal? Or was it two lonely souls brushing up against something they shouldn't have? Not out of lust, not out of some plan sin, but out of emptiness, out of silence, out of the simple, painful human need to feel alive again. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not even asking for understanding. But I am asking you to be honest. Tell me in the comments if you've ever been in a moment like that, where nothing happened, but everything changed. And if you believe these stories deserve to be told, stories that don't wear makeup, that don't tie themselves up in neat little bows, then like this video. And subscribe to Shocking Infidelity Saga. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We explore the quiet corners of the human heart. Sometimes the worst sins are the ones no one can see. Not the ones written in bold letters across broken promises. Not the ones that crash through doors or shatter families in one loud explosion. No. The worst ones are quieter. A glance held too long. A silence that stretched a second past what was safe. A thought you let linger. A feeling you let live. Not a touch. Not a kiss. Just the space between them. And those are the ones that never leave you. Because they have nowhere to go. No one to confess to. No punishment, no forgiveness, just you. Alone with the echo of a moment you couldn't stop and maybe didn't want to. I used to think cheating only lived in actions. In hotel rooms and lies and lipstick on collars. But now I know. It can live in the space between two people sitting quietly on a couch. It can live in the longing behind a look. In the way someone makes you feel seen when you've been invisible for so long, you forgot what light felt like. And the worst part? No one else ever knows. You carry it alone. And you keep walking through your life as if nothing happened. Even though everything did, be careful with your loneliness. It doesn't always scream. It doesn't always cry for help. Sometimes, it waits. In the hallway. In the dark. On the stairs at 2 a.m. In the stillness of a house where no one says goodnight anymore. It waits for the moment your guard drops. The moment your heart sighs too loudly. The moment someone looks at you, not through you, and for the first time in years, you remember what it felt like to matter. That's where it begins. Not in lust. Not in betrayal. In hunger. In silence. In a need you were too afraid to admit you had. And by the time you see what's happening, you're already in it. And it's already in you. So whatever you take from this story, whatever judgment you hold or forgiveness you feel, just remember, not all wounds bleed. Some just stay. Forever.